Is Dr. Troutman here? Oh, thank you. There he is. Thank you for joining us, of course. Dr. Troutman will be a key member of our executive team, providing leadership on operational and strategic matters that pertain to all aspects of academic affairs and innovation. Dr. Troutman, welcome to the team. We look forward to working with you and great things to help higher education in our great state of Texas. I would now like to pass the gavel to Mr. Javed Anwar to officially call the meeting of the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics to order. Mr. Anwar. Yes.
Is it on?
Press it, it'll light up. There we go.
Is it on?
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Javed Anwar. I am the chair of the Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics. It is 9 a.m. I would like to call October 26, 2022 Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics meeting to order. This meeting is being held via live broadcast. Before I begin, I like to take this opportunity to welcome those joining us with video conference and ask other that you observe the following etiquettes. Please state your name before you speak. Mute your telephone before when not speaking. Mute your phone and keep background noise to minimum. Members, when I call your name, please announce your presence. S. Javed Anwar, aye. Welcome, Wilson. He's not.
He should be
not
joining us by Zoom, sir. He's just not
Okay.
on the call yet.
Richard Clemmer,
Present.
Fred Farias,
Here.
Robert Gaunt. I guess not. Sam Torn,
Here.
Daniel Wong,
Present.
Georgia Blackwell.
Here.
Okay. Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum. Agenda item number 2, consideration of possible action to approve the minutes from the July 27, 22 committee meeting. Members, do I have a motion and a second, please?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Those in favor say aye, and those opposed say no. The motion passes. Agenda item number 3 is the public testimony agenda item relating to Committee on Innovation, Data, and Educational Analytics. We do not have any registered to testify, so we will go to the next item. Agenda item number 4 is consideration of possible action to approve the consent calendar. Consent calendar include that can be approved without comments or discussion. This allows us to save time and other items that need more of our attention. The consent items are highlighted in the gray on the agenda. Of course, any board member can request that an agenda item can be added or removed from the consent calendar. We are going to vote on the consent calendar in 2 votes. One on the non-rule items and one on the rules item. Members, following are the rules items that are on the consent calendar. Agenda item 5C, consideration of possible action to approve the report to the legislature on high school individual graduation IGC graduates, Texas Education Code, Section 28.02591. Agenda number 5E is consideration of possible action to adopt the recommendation relating to the faculty audit report. Agenda number 5E is consideration of possible action to approve the report on student financial aid in Texas Higher Education Fiscal Year 2021, General Appropriations Act, Senate Bill 1, Article 3, Section 2487, Texas Legislature. Does anybody want to remove any items from the consent calendar? Are there any other non-agenda item that anybody wants to add to the consent calendar? Member, is there a motion to approve and the non-rule consent calendar? I need
So
a.
moved.
and
So
a
moved. Welcome, Wilson.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye, or the people oppose no, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Members, the following proposed rules on the consent calendar for consideration are 5G1, consideration of possible action to adopt proposed amendment to the board rule. Texas Administration Code TAC, Chapter 22, Subchapter A, Section 22.2 concerning the general provision for student financial aid program. 5G2, consideration and possible action to adopt amendments to board rules TAC, Chapter 23, Subchapter D, Section 23.94, 23.95, 23.96, and 23.9 concerning the loan repayment program and mental health professional. Does anybody want to remove this from the consent calendar? Member, do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Any discussion? If no, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes. Agenda item 5A is the building a talent strong data insight for preliminary head count for fall of 2023. Dr. Larkin Skinner, Assistant Commissioner for Data Management Research, will provide a brief description and be available to answer questions. This item is for information only. Mr. Thanks. Ms. Skinner.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, and committee members. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm Dr. Kara Larkin Skinner, and I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Data Management and Research, and I'm pleased to share with you our fall preliminary 22 enrollment data. Next slide. The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board has a long history of collecting preliminary enrollment data. The data are collected shortly after each institution's census date, which is the 12th class date. The data are collected from 2-year technical, state, and community colleges, 4-year public and independent universities, and public and private health-related institutions. We'd like to acknowledge and thank the institutions who reported these figures to us during an especially busy time of year. We'd also like to acknowledge our staff who worked diligently on this project and worked closely with the institutions, especially Torsha Button and Ginger Gossman. And last, official enrollment data are currently being certified, and they will be finalized by the end of this calendar year. Next slide. Before we look too closely at the data, it's worth noting that preliminary enrollment numbers are simply an estimate and something that we use as an early indicator of our enrollment figures. Additionally, the certified or official numbers historically come out lower than the figures reported in this preliminary collection. Over the last 3 years, for instance, they come out about 2% lower than the figures we'll see today. There's a number of reasons why this happens, and one of those is that students are still completing the withdrawal process. Next slide. As we head into the next slides, I did want to call out that this presentation covers data from 2019 through 2022, which is a bit of a departure in how we've done this in the past. But we did want to illustrate changes that may have occurred since the pandemic. Additionally, the presentation is focused on two important comparison points. We're going to compare this year to last year, and we're going to compare this year to 2019, which we are using as a pre-pandemic anchor point, if you will. Next slide. So here you can see some of the main takeaways from our preliminary enrollment this year. The primary takeaway is that statewide enrollment is similar to last year, but we have not yet recovered to pre-pandemic levels. We do continue to see variations in enrollment patterns by demographic groups, with white and Hispanic students decreasing. Our male student enrollment increased since last year, and our female enrollment declined again and has been in decline since 2019. Enrollment in some regions increased since last year, but enrollment overall remains below 2019. And on a final note, these trends that we are seeing in Texas are similar to what's happening across the nation. Early national reports are showing closer to an 8% decline in enrollment, where Texas is showing closer to a 4 or 5% overall. Next slide. So in this slide, we're looking at preliminary enrollment compared to prior certified figures by sector. The black rectangle area is our current preliminary figures, and just to the right of the rectangle, you can see the percent difference between this year and last year, and also this year compared to 2019 or our pre-pandemic. As you can see, the two-year institutions have experienced the most significant declines, a loss of nearly 80,000 students since 2019, but they have shown a slight increase from last year. It's worth noting that our state technical schools, which are included in this category, grew by about 5,000 students during the same time period. We'll take a closer look at that in a minute. Other sectors have recovered or remained relatively stable, with our health-related institutions growing by about 7% since the pandemic. Public universities and independent colleges and universities did show a slight increase since 2019, but we do believe when the final figures come in that they will probably be pretty flat or even with pre-pandemic enrollment figures. Next slide. So this slide is one of our legacy slides, and the focus is to show how the count of enrollments for our public two-year and public universities compare over the last 22 years. The slide remains of interest because it illustrates points of fluctuation in both sectors, as well as the share of enrollments by each sector. And what you can see is that where public university enrollments have steadily grown across time, our public two-year enrollments have traditionally been influenced by shifts in the economy. Next slide. So we want to take a closer look at the two-year sector. An area that has shown significant growth is within our Texas State Technical Colleges. They've shown a 44% increase in enrollment since 2019. The Lamar State Colleges have also experienced enrollment growth. And additionally, there are some community colleges that have experienced growth since 2019. For instance, Odessa College is up about 9%, and Northeast Lakeview is up, a part of the Alamo Colleges district is up about 11%. And there are many community colleges that had enrollment increases from last year as well. Next slide. So this slide is simply a visual representation of the data that was shown earlier, but it allows us to look at the annual trend for each year since 2019. The best way to view this slide, in my opinion, is to orient your eyes to the 0% line on the y-axis. This line represents the year 2019, again, our pre-pandemic level. And we're viewing the rate of growth or decline each year since. All of the numbers below the line indicate a drop in enrollment, and all of the numbers above indicate an increase since 2019. One takeaway is that total preliminary enrollment remains lower compared to 2019. Overall, the state is down around 65,000 students. While other sectors have mostly recovered, community colleges are accounting for the overall decline in statewide enrollment. It's worth mentioning that this is not necessarily unique to Texas and is a trend that we're seeing nationally. Our community college colleagues report a number of challenges facing enrollments, including the high-paying jobs that are available in the workforce right now and a decline in dual credit students, for examples. There are bright spots in enrollment trends, however, especially in our health-related institutions. Next slide. So as part of the Building a Talent Strong Texas strategic plan, the coordinating board has made a commitment to advancing our goals equitably. An initial step toward this is to ensure that we're disaggregating data by our racial and ethnic groups. Similar to the prior slide, the zero line represents 2019. And as you can see, there are enrollment patterns. These enrollment patterns vary for different groups, which illustrates the importance of looking at our data in more detail. Specific numbers for these groups are provided as a reference at the end of this presentation, and they will be posted on our website. There are a few items I'd like to draw your attention to. Our Asian students have increased slightly each year since 2019. Black or African American students showed initial decline, but did increase over last year. And both Hispanic and white students have declined. The declining white student population does align with what we're seeing in national trends as well. It's worth noting that some groups shown here represent fairly small numbers of students, which means that minor changes can appear as large percentage fluctuations. For example, the American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Hawaiian Pacific Islander students. And as I close out this slide, I'll close with a side note that we do recognize that our institutions are still in the progress of finalizing these numbers, and we expect the figures may shift some as final enrollments are reported. This is especially true for the unknown category, as we imagine that those students are likely to shift into other categories. That said, these are all trends that we will closely examine when the final enrollments are reported. Next slide. So in this slide, we're looking at changes in enrollment patterns by gender. There are really two features of the slide. On the left, we're looking at the rate of change by year. And on the right, we're looking at the overall proportion of enrollment by gender. As you look on the left side of the slide, you can see that female enrollments have continued to decline since 2019, where male enrollments are on the rise, though not to pre-pandemic levels. Looking at the far right side of the screen, we see that female students still hold the larger share of enrollments, and the proportion of enrollments by gender is similar to pre-pandemic proportions. Next slide. In this slide, we're looking at enrollment change by region, and this is since 2019. There continues to be regional variation. However, enrollments across each region do remain lower than they were in 2019. Next slide. And as I wrap up this presentation, we're going to focus in on regional changes from last year. We do see recovery across the state, where 6 out of 10 of our regions have shown growth in their enrollment numbers. Next slide. So as I close out today, I did want to mention that we intend to prepare a research brief when the final enrollment numbers come in, and I'd like to invite Commissioner Keller to add any comments, and then I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kara. I'd just like to underline a couple of points from Kara's presentation for the board. So first, it would be the point around the community colleges. So the good news is it seems like the community college enrollments have pretty much leveled out. So we were seeing some pretty steep declines the first couple of years of the pandemic. And we had hoped that they would level out last year, but we did see pretty significant declines, but now we're seeing that they're pretty flat. And what we hear from community colleges is, as Kara mentioned, is that there are a number of colleges that are up in their enrollments. Particularly what I'm hearing from colleges is they're seeing more demand in their workforce programs, which is encouraging. for universities, there's, we're pretty flat overall, although you will see some national discussions about declines in university enrollments, particularly for entering freshmen. And that's not something that we're seeing in Texas quite the same way. So it seems like that her enrollments are a little more robust than what we're seeing in a number of other states. But clearly we've got a long way to go to get our enrollments back to where they were in pre-pandemic. And of course, this is in this context of where our economy's been accelerating in the directions that are going to require additional post-secondary credentials much faster than anyone anticipated. So we don't just need to get back to where we were. We actually need to serve many more people than we were serving pre-pandemic, especially adult learners, and recapture folks who stopped out or dropped. But be happy to take any questions about what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, one thing is your comparisons here assume a stable population. In fact, the population of the state is increasing. So actually the decrease is more significant than as a percentage. But the second question I have is on these two-year colleges. Okay, if I'm a young man or woman and I need to work and I go get a job and that job pays me X, what data would we have to show that young man or woman that by enrolling in this two-year college over the next 10 years or their career, they will get more, be better off than if they just stick with their job and keep doing it?
It's interesting that you asked that, because that is a major project that we've been working on related to credentials of value for Texas to actually show that, if you get a high school diploma and you go into workforce, this is an average wage. If you get an associate's degree in a particular program, this is the average wage that you might be looking at in your particular region. So that is something that the commissioner is rolling out right now as we speak, and there'll be more to come on that. I think nationally there have been data points that show the value in a community college or an associate's degree, but I don't know that there's been a lot of work in kind of getting it back to the program level like we're doing in Texas right now.
That's important.
I have a question about how does this 2-year drop in enrollment impact our goal of 60-30?
Yeah, I think anytime we see a large drop in enrollment, we are certainly going to struggle on enrollment goals, obviously. What we're hearing from community colleges is that they're also struggling on the retention, which will subsequently lead to lower graduation rates. So that's something that we'll have to watch closely and really work with the schools on to help them improve those graduation rates. But it's definitely an indicator we need to pay attention to closely.
One other point I'd add is, especially with our regional universities, we're seeing now where some of them are reporting that they've got fewer applications for transfer because the community college enrollments have been depressed, and so that'll ripple through the whole system for the next few years, and we should especially see that like in our regional universities that have a lot of transfer students that are coming from the community colleges.
Do we need to have many more correction in terms of even program try to meet that goal of 60-30 in the next few years?
Absolutely, yeah. And especially in shorter term workforce programs. So it's and that's something that we put a marker down with the new Talent Strong Texas plan. But we're going to really have to lean into in partnership with the colleges over these next several months. Is it not just associate's degrees, can be certificate programs, can be short-term programs. So you can have programs that in 6 or 8 weeks, somebody can pretty significantly change what their earnings potential is, and then they can stack that with other kinds of credentials. So we have historically sort of punted that to the colleges to market their own programs individually. So we will be rolling out our one-stop My Texas Future portal, and then working with in partnership with employers and chambers of commerce, other stakeholders around the state, to try to get that word out about here are the kinds of opportunities that are available. Here's how that can translate into wage gains for you. Here's what the demand is like for different kinds of credentials, the need for folks in different occupations around the state. So that will be should be rolling out in a soft launch before the end of the year, and then we'll make a big marketing push around the My Texas Future early in 23. So by the time we have our next board meeting, we should be just about to launch the our marketing push around My Texas Future.
Last question, just real quick. Just out of my curiosity, do we count those certificates from the private employers, private industry into our 60-30 goal?
So we did broaden our what we count to include not just degrees and certificates, but also the short-term workforce credentials. Now, where this will come up as we're talking about the community college finance issues in particular. We don't collect data on all of the programs that are happening, especially on continuing education and workforce programs. So we are going to be working closely, especially with the community colleges, to first we're organizing a survey to get a better sense of sort of how much they've got going on their workforce programs, the short-term workforce programs, and then we'll work with them to organize additional data collections so that Kara and her team have a more complete picture across enrollments and across the production of credentials, to also include, like, for example, commercial driver's license programs and other kinds of programs that are high demand, but that are historically we have not been able to include.
Thank you.
If I may make a comment, I agree with Commissioner, and what we're talking about, Mr. Wong, is I think what I stress is, these short workforce credentials. I mean, we can't overemphasize the quality that has to be part of these programs. So in my personal opinion, it's not just about the numbers and getting credentials, but about the quality of the programs, because I can't tell you how many college provosts or university provost presidents that I've talked to. And I stress that too, because it's really about the quality of the credential, of the degree, certificate for the student at the end of the day, because that's what it's about. So that's just to make the comment, because as I get calls, and Commissioner and I talk about this quite often, that it's very important that we do continue to reach our goals, but also to have the quality and not just to put out programs, to put out certificates and programs.
Yeah, and on that point, just to build on one of on the chairman's comments. So one of the things that we saw, and a clear lesson that we learned during the pandemic with various grant programs like the True Grant and Accelerating Credentials of Value with the Seed grants for short-term programs, is that the more effective, higher quality programs were designed in close partnership between employers and the institutions, where you had the employers at the table, ideally from initial design of the program, so that they have that ongoing feedback about what kind of skills students need, and you don't have a situation where the higher ed institution is trying to stipulate for the employers what quality should look like, but that's something that they iterate together.
So, Commissioner, on the to follow up on that, is that what we would attribute? I believe one of Kara's slides showed an increase in enrollment in technical colleges. Is that what is? Can we put our finger on what is causing that? Is that workforce initiatives or more of these employer-driven requirements? But why is that area performing better than others?
Yeah, I think it's the close partnerships between the TSTCs and the employers. Now, the TSTCs would be the first to tell you they really have a focus on a narrower range of credentials than the community colleges that are responsible for producing. So the TSTCs are especially laser focused on those high demand, higher wage kinds of short-term credentials, and they do an excellent job working very closely with employers in the design of those programs. And they're redesigning those programs constantly. They shut down programs that don't have the demand or don't translate into wage premiums for their graduates. And so what we've seen there is rapid growth in enrollment. Now on the community college side, we have historically funded community colleges just in terms of really enrollment, seat time, and their contact hours in programs, as opposed to on the TSTC side, where the state funding is linked to that wage premium. So, of course, we'll have a discussion tomorrow. One of the recommendations that'll be on the table for this next legislative session would be a radical reform of community college finance. So there'd be much stronger focus on outcomes, especially on producing credentials of value that are in targeted fields, that are in high demand fields and regions, and for the state as a whole, and tying incentives, additional funding to those production of those credentials, including those short-term workforce credentials. That would be a fundamental shift. So what we'd hope to be seeing in the next few years, when Kara is making her presentations, we would hope to see rapid increases in enrollments, community colleges, particularly in their workforce programs, with an emphasis on those targeted fields.
So I know some of the community colleges have already engaged in, employer-driven kind of programs on their own account. Would it be our plan to kind of advise other community colleges or best practices, help them kind of ramp those up? Or is that within our purview, or is that more legislative requirement? Or
Well, yeah, we're already in these conversations with the leading colleges. I think so we need to, as you suggest, we need to work in close partnership with the leaders. So not just the TSTCs, but if you look at the workforce programs at Lone Star, at Dallas, at San Jacinto Community College, El Paso Community College, their enrollments are up significantly in their workforce programs at El Paso Community College because of those employer partnerships. Odessa College was mentioned earlier. So, we have a number of colleges that are recognized as national leaders in what they're doing in their workforce education programs. So we definitely want to work closely with them, and where we can help facilitate partnerships with other colleges to help them expand what they're doing. But I do think addressing some of these deeper structural issues in the finance system, make sure the incentives are aligned and the resources are going to be there, especially for those smaller colleges, to offer those additional workforce programs, is going to be critical.
Thank you.
Members, does anyone have any questions? If not, we'll move on to agenda item 5B, is an update on data management initiative. Ms. Lori Fay, Deputy Commissioner for Data Analytics and Innovation, will provide a presentation and will be able to answer any question. This item is for information only. Right.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, and committee members. My name is Lori Fye. I'm honored to serve as the Deputy Commissioner for Data Analytics and Innovation, and it's always a pleasure to be here to give you a quarterly update on the data modernization initiative at the agency. Next slide, please. As you know, this effort is a sweeping transformation of the agency's both technology and data infrastructure. Our goal, which remains our North Star, is to equip our stakeholders with insight and support for making better decisions. Within that goal, we have these three primary objectives: of significantly redesigned infrastructure that uses modern cloud-based technology to transform and to streamline and improve the way we collect, manage, and provision our data. Expanded data offerings that address the primary needs and priority questions of our stakeholders. And finally, embedding continuous improvement so that our offerings and our processes continue to stay fresh, relevant, and meaningful. Next slide. As a reminder, this initiative involves more than 23 discrete projects, so there is a lot of work underway. The result is this very busy slide, which we won't go through in detail, but I do want to call out a few highlights. There have been some important accomplishments since the last update in July, and I want to highlight those for you today. We completed user testing on our revised financial aid data system submission process. That's a mouthful. We refer to it as FADS, and are currently making updates based on that user feedback. We are on track to launch a pilot with 6 of our institutions where they will submit through the new process and submit through the old process. So we have confirmation that that the results are as expected. And those 6 institutions are a mix of 2-year, 4-year, and private institutions. So we have a great cross-section of partners helping us in the final phase of testing. That full process will go online in early February. So it's very near term. In addition, we are in the final stages of preparation to launch the new agency website. This is a much anticipated improvement. Yes, we cannot wait. Thanks to Assistant Commissioner Marjorie Barrett and communications team and a cadre of other supporters and partners. We are close to being ready to launch that next month with a much more intuitive and delightful user experience. So very excited about that. And of course, also equally excited about launching a new data website early in 2023. And I'll give you a little sneak peek of some of the visualizations. But the goal of that is obviously a refreshed look that is consistent with the branding for the coordinating board, related to our agency website, but that also includes interactive visualizations that are focused on our Talent Strong Texas metrics. So again, a nice departure and upgrade from our current website situation. There are a number of other key components that will go into field testing with some of our institution partners in early 2023. The Secure Data Enclave and Privileged Reporting are 2 really important features that are new to our data offerings. And those will provide for tiered access to more detailed data and high value data like labor market outcomes and the profiles of incoming transfer student classes. So 2 things that are very hard for institutions to get their hands on themselves that we're going to be able to provide through this differentiated access to information. This approach helps ensure that the right people have access to the right information in order to make better decisions and better targeted supports for students. While several of our large institutions have the ability to do this on their own, most of our institutions cannot do this. And so we're very excited to be able to provide this platform that equips all of our institutions with a baseline level of capabilities that give them improved insight, to the point about the earlier conversation about completion rates, like how are students actually moving through their programs? Are they on track to complete? Are they at risk for not completing? So to be able to zero in on those groups of students who truly do need more support or more assistance to complete, and also call out those places where things are going right, and we can learn from the practices that those institutions are using. So very excited about that. I also want to take this moment. This slide obviously represents a lot of work, and there's a huge team of people who are making this work happen. So I did want to take a moment, as we're sort of on this, we're on the cusp of many of the deliverables becoming visible to the outside world, and frankly, the inside world. But these 23 projects involve a huge team of people, as you might imagine. Currently, we have 27 members of the agency team working alongside 29 contract members from our vendor partners in order to make this actually all happen. The core team that's leading this is from leadership across the agency, Office of General Counsel, Information Systems and Solutions. So obviously, strategic implementation, communications, and then our data management and research team. So this is truly an agency-wide effort, and it only is happening because of the dedication and persistence of the folks that are leading this team. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank the team for continuing to power through, sometimes under some challenging circumstances, and to bring this vision to life. Next slide. And last, just wanted to share a sneak peek of the data website, which you've seen before. That's the image on the left. And the image on the right is a work in progress view of one of the data visualizations. This one is on student debt, manageable, our new Talent Strong Texas goal around no or manageable debt for students, and gives you just an idea of the look and feel that will be coming our way. Our goal is to put information, give users the ability to interact with the data and customize it to their area of interest, whether that's a particular institution, a particular part of the state, or a particular student group. As I said, our communications team and others have been hard at work to make this, to bring this to life, and we're very excited. I hope by the next board meeting, you actually are seeing that and have already had a chance to interact with it. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, are there any questions?
I have a question. I have a question for you. On the last slide, will the person going in it, will they have the ability to drill down and to see what the differences are? Like on the debt rate, African Americans 13.5%, but all the other groups, there's no number. So would I be able to?
Oh, yeah, maybe it's just
down?
not showing up, Ms. Williams. It's possible that yes, we will. So we'll launch with some state level views, particularly on the Talent Strong Texas metrics.
Mhm.
But our plan over time is to make those increasingly more granular so that you can actually see a difference at the program level.
Mhm.
So for certain programs, how do those levels of debt vary across our racial and ethnic groups? But yes, the idea is to provide increased amount of finer grained information so that you can actually see where the differences are and target supports.
All right, thank you.
Members, are there any questions? If not, we'll move on to agenda item 5C. Was approved on the consent calendar. Now we move on to agenda item 5D, is consideration possible action to adopt the recommendation relating to the certification of gifts that are fundable through the Texas Research Incentive Program TRIP for Engineering Research University. Ms. Emily Cormer, Assistant Commissioner for Funding, will present this item and be available to answer any questions.
Good morning. I'm Emily Cormier, Assistant Commissioner for Funding and Resource Planning. So I'm bringing forward the next round of gifts recommended for certification for the Texas Research Incentive Program, or TRIP, as it's more commonly called. Moving to the next slide. So TRIP was established by the legislature in 2009 to incentivize universities to seek private gifts and donations to support their research endeavors. To support this goal, the program provides state matching funds for gifts made to institutions for research, and gifts are matched through a tiered system where the state dollars increase as the gift amount increases. Gifts must be at least $100,000 and to be matched, and the match tops out at $10 million. So this allows institutions to go to donors and allow them to think that their money will go farther with a state match for their donations. Only emerging research universities are eligible to receive funds through the TRIP, and those are listed on the right side of the slide. And there are 8 institutions who are currently in the program. Moving to the next slide. So since the start of this program, institutions have received over $900 million in eligible gifts that could be received TRIP matching funds. That $900 million turns into a little over $700 million in state matching funds. So you can see from the chart on the right that the legislature has made a significant investment in this program over time, although that funding has varied considerably by year. These funds are trusteed at the Higher Education Coordinating Board, who then distributes the funds to the institutions to match gifts in the order that they were received. Matching funds are distributed only up to the amount appropriated, for this purpose, and almost 400 million has been provided as a state match to institutions since the start of TRIP. What has resulted, though, is that the gifts have outpaced appropriations, particularly in the past few years where there's been a leveling off of funding available. This leaves over 300 million in eligible matches that are available to be funded by the state and are awaiting appropriation. Just to put this in context, the last appropriated dollar matched a gift made in 2017. So moving to the next slide. So what we're here today to do is just to certify the next round of gifts received by universities for matching funds. The TRIP gifts go through an extensive review process, including a peer review where institutions can challenge each other's gift submissions. And the review cycle concludes with certification of matches by the board. For this board item, staff recommend the certification of 153 gifts worth 97 million in donations and an associated state match of 79 million. Listed on this slide is a breakdown by institution. That concludes my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Members, is there any questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, no questions, but I wonder if Ms. Collier can, for the newer board members, kind of go over the Texas Research Incentive Programs versus, why aren't Texas, University of Texas at Austin, A&M and other schools not listed on here versus the 10 research institutions? If you could give the new board members a little background on that, please.
Sure. The legislature has set up a variety of different research funds that support different types of universities. So the Texas Research University Fund is provided state appropriations that only go to University of Texas at Austin and Texas A&M University. So they compete for those dollars. This next round of appropriations that are available are then provided to eligible emerging research universities, and those receive a research fund called Core Research Support, and then the TRIP. And then there's also eligibility for what's called the National Research University Fund, which is a constitutional endowment to support research at certain schools. There's also the Comprehensive Research Fund, where it's basically everyone else in the state. So the legislature kind of buckets institutions into different categories, so they're competing more among their peer groups.
So Emily, NRUF is in addition to this TRIP. There's not an overlap there, correct?
That's correct. It's the same institutions who are eligible for appropriations, but it's not, it's an entirely separate program.
Got it.
If there's no more question. Member, is there a motion to approve the recommendation relating to the certifications of gifts that are fundable through the Texas Research Incentive Program for Emerging Research University? Do I have a motion and a second, please?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I'll second.
Any discussion, members? If not, those who in favor of say aye, opposed say no. Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Agenda item 5E through G2 were approved on the consent calendar. Now we move on to agenda item 5G3, consideration of possible action to adopt proposed amendment to the board rules 22.128, 22.135 concerning the Texas Colleges Work Study Program. Dr. Charles Taro, I'm sorry if I didn't say. Assistant Commissioner is available to answer any questions.
Thank you. As Mr. Anwar mentioned, I'm Chad Quintero-Pulse, Assistant Commissioner for Student Financial Aid Programs here at the Coordinating Board. And I'm here to provide you with information about negotiated rulemaking activities that occurred on May 10th of this year. The agency initiated negotiated rulemaking with the goal of providing institutions with greater predictability and flexibility with the allocations provided through the agency's Texas College Work Study funding strategy. 16 individuals representing public community colleges, public health institution, health-related institutions, public universities, public state colleges, and independent and private colleges and universities participated in the negotiating rulemaking effort. And I'm pleased to say that the committee reached consensus on proposed rule changes to achieve the stated goal. The consensus centered on two primary aspects of the allocation process. First, the proposed rule combines the allocation process for the Texas College Work-Study Program and the Work-Study Student Mentorship Program. This provides institutions with greater flexibility for the use of these funds to achieve each institution's goals, while still setting expectations for an institution's commitment to the mentorship program. Second, allocations for each year of the biennium would be provided to institutions at the start of the biennium. This provides greater predictability of the funding levels and aligns with the approach that has previously been implemented for both the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant and the Tuition Equalization Grant. Additional items reflected in the proposed rule include modifications to the treatment of part-time students in the allocation formula to provide allocation levels more representative of student enrollment, institutional enrollments, tying the demonstration of financial need to a more representative industry standard, and adopting language that better aligns the work-study rules with the rules of other financial aid programs. If approved by the board, the modifications to the allocation methodology will go into effect for the 2023-2024 academic year. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the negotiated rulemaking activities that occurred or the proposed rules.
Members, is there any questions, please? If no, member, is there a motion to approve the proposed amendment to the board rules 22.128, 22.135 concerning the Texas College Work Program Study? I have a motion and a second, please.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? If not, those in favor say aye. Those in favor say no. Aye. Motion-
Aye.
Agenda number 6 is adjournment. Do I have a motion and a second? Second.
Second.
Those in favor say aye. Those in favor say no.
Aye.
Motion passes. We are adjourned. We will now take a short break to allow staff to set up for the Committee on Academic